In the very beginning, right after no contact starts, the avoidant enters a psychological phase that looks calm on the surface but is completely misleading underneath. They tell themselves they're fine. They tell themselves they needed this space. They convince themselves that silence feels peaceful, that distance feels healthy, that separation gives them clarity. This illusion of peace is their first emotional defense, a shield they use to protect themselves from feeling anything too real, too soon, too deep. And for a short while they genuinely believe it. They breathe easier. They feel less pressure. They feel less overwhelmed. They feel like they're finally back in control of their emotional world. But what they don't understand is that this calmness isn't the absence of feelings, it's the delay of them. Avoidants process emotions slowly, painfully slowly. Their nervous system doesn't register emotional loss immediately. They need distance, time, and silence before their emotional awareness even begins to activate. So while you're sitting with the heaviness of the breakup or disconnection, trying to understand everything at once, the avoidant sits inside this temporary bubble of relief, believing the worst is already behind them. They don't feel the consequences yet. They don't feel the loss yet. They don't feel the emptiness yet. They just feel the comfort of emotional quiet, the absence of tension, the false idea that silence equals safety. Inside this illusion, they tell themselves a story. They needed this. I needed this. Things will stabilize now. They feel proud of their ability to detach, proud of their ability to control their feelings, proud of not falling apart. But this pride is fragile. It's built on denial, not reality. It's built on repression, not healing. They don't know it yet, but this illusion of peace is the calm before their internal storm. Their emotional freeze response is doing exactly what it was designed to do, delay the pain until their body feels safe enough to experience it. During this phase, the avoidant may even appear happier, lighter, or more stable. They may go about their daily routines as if nothing happened. They may tell themselves that the connection was too intense, too stressful, too overwhelming. They may reassure themselves that they made the right choice, that distance is better, that solitude is safer. And because avoidants confuse emotional numbness with emotional stability, they mistake this temporary quiet as evidence that they're unaffected. But beneath that quiet, tiny cracks begin forming. Their mind doesn't feel your absence yet, but their nervous system registers a shift. Your energy is no longer nearby. Your messages aren't coming in. Your emotional warmth isn't calming their subconscious anymore. Something that was once steady, predictable, and grounding is suddenly gone. And although they don't consciously feel it yet, their internal world has already started changing. This is why the illusion of peace is so dangerous for them. It tricks them, it lies to them, it convinces them that no contact doesn't hurt, that emotional separation won't impact them, that they can go on as if nothing truly mattered. But avoidance isn't healing, it's postponing. And the more they lean into this false calm, the harder the emotional wave will hit when it finally breaks. In this early stage, they underestimate you. They underestimate your absence. They underestimate the role you played in their emotional balance. They assume you're still emotionally available in the background, still waiting, still wanting, still hoping. They rely on this assumption because it keeps their illusion intact. As long as they believe you're still there emotionally, they can continue pretending they're unaffected. What they don't realize is that no contact is working. Not against them, but inside them. It's slowly shifting the emotional dynamic. It's quietly removing the security they once took for granted. It's gently dismantling their illusion of control. And the deeper this illusion feels, the more shocking the truth will be when it finally hits them. The peace they feel now is nothing more than emotional numbness, a temporary shield that protects them from feeling the full impact of losing you. But the illusion always fades, and when it does, everything they've been suppressing will rise all at once, pushing them toward the exact moment they never expected, the moment they decide to reach out. After the illusion of peace begins to fade, something subtle starts happening inside the avoidant, something they don't notice at first, but something that grows louder, heavier, and more intrusive with every passing day. It begins in the smallest, quietest way possible. Their mind wanders back to you, not because they choose to think about you, not because they suddenly feel ready for closeness, but because the brain has a habit of returning to what once regulated it emotionally. And whether they admit it or not, your presence once regulated them. Your consistency soothed them. Your emotional steadiness calmed their nervous system. So when that energy disappears, their mind reacts long before their heart is willing to. It usually starts in a random moment, a flash of memory that appears out of nowhere. They might hear a phrase that reminds them of your voice. They might see something that reminds them of your habits. They might pass by a place you mentioned, or see something online that echoes a moment shared between you, and at first they brush it off. They tell themselves it means nothing. They distract themselves. They look away. They change the subject in their mind. But the human brain doesn't suppress emotional connections forever. When something matters, even if they deny it, their mind will always circle back. This wandering of thought grows stronger when they experience silence at the same time. Avoidants depend heavily on background emotional reassurance, the knowledge that someone is safely there even if they don't engage consistently. When your reassurance disappears, even if you're not physically around them, their subconscious notices the shift. Their mind senses the emptiness you left behind. It tries to fill the void by revisiting old patterns, old moments, old conversations. This is why they begin thinking about you unintentionally. Their system is adjusting to the loss they haven't processed yet. What makes this stage so important, and so terrifying for them, is that it's the first time the thought of you comes with discomfort instead of numbness. It's the moment where emotional memory sneaks past their avoidance mechanism. They begin remembering things they didn't expect, the softness in your tone when you cared, the way your eyes looked when you were trying to understand them, the steadiness in your energy when they were shutting down. These memories carry emotional weight, and that weight begins pressing on them slowly. At this stage, the avoidant becomes confused because they don't know why you're suddenly appearing in their thoughts. They don't understand why a simple memory tightens something in their chest. They don't understand why they feel unsettled when something reminds them of you. Their entire identity is built around the belief that distance is safety, so they do everything they can to push the thoughts away. But the more they push, the more the thoughts return. This is the beginning of emotional activation. They may open their phone and, without thinking, scroll through old conversations. They may hover over your profile without clicking. They may glance at your name in their contact list. They may check to see if you're active, even though they have no intention of messaging you. These actions feel small, insignificant, harmless, but inside them, something major is happening. This is their emotional awareness waking up. The mind wandering back to you is the first crack in their emotional detachment. It creates a loop that repeats, intensifies, grows stronger. Each time they think of you, the silence becomes heavier. Each time they remember a moment with you, the present feels emptier. Each time they feel a flicker of discomfort, their avoidance loses a little bit of power. This stage is where they begin to feel the loss before they are ready to acknowledge it. It's where longing begins but stays buried. It's where regret begins but stays unspoken. It's where attachment resurfaces but stays hidden under layers of pride and fear. But the thoughts returning again and again are not random. They're the beginning of emotional unraveling. Your memory becomes the one thing they can't fully escape, because it carries emotional truth they've been avoiding. And as these thoughts become more frequent, as their mind continues circling back to you no matter how much they resist, something inside them begins shifting toward the moment they tried so hard to avoid. The moment where missing you becomes louder than their fear. This is the stage that sets everything else in motion. The fear doesn't hit the avoidant suddenly. It creeps in slowly, quietly, like a shadow moving across their emotional world. At first, they simply notice that silence feels different. It's not the silence of someone trying to prove a point. It's not the silence of someone waiting for them to return. It's a deeper silence, a quieter one, a silence that feels like a door gently closing. And avoidants fear closed doors more than anything else. They don't fear intimacy the way people think. They fear that the moment they decide to open up, no one will be on the other side anymore. This is when the fear begins, when your silence stops feeling like space and starts feeling like distance. At first, they try to convince themselves that you're still there emotionally, that you're still holding on in the background, that this is just another cycle you'll eventually break by reaching out. But slowly, they begin noticing things they cannot ignore. You don't post in the same way. Your energy online feels lighter, like someone who isn't waiting. Maybe your conversations with others look different. Maybe your confidence has shifted. Maybe your absence feels too consistent. The avoidant is sensitive in ways people don't expect. They pick up on emotional energy faster than they pick up on words. And your emotional energy is shifting. This realization strikes them in moments they least expect. They feel it when they open their phone and realize an entire day has passed without a single sign of you. They feel it when they check your profile and sense that you're no longer emotionally orbiting them. They feel it when a memory of you emerges and instead of comfort, they feel a flicker of anxiety. They feel it when someone mentions your name and their stomach tightens in a way they can't rationalize. Avoidants live in a constant tug of war between wanting closeness and fearing it. But the greatest fear they hold, the fear deeper than intimacy, deeper than commitment, deeper than vulnerability, is the fear of someone they care about emotionally detaching from them. When you detach quietly, gracefully, without drama or anger, it threatens their entire emotional structure. They don't know how to process it because they're used to people either chasing them or giving up instantly in anger. But your silence doesn't carry desperation or resentment. It carries acceptance. And acceptance is what scares them the most. Because acceptance means you're moving on. This is the moment they realize that your absence is real. Fear grows because they begin to understand something they never thought they would. You don't need them anymore. Your silence isn't an invitation. It's a boundary. It's not a punishment, it's protection. And the avoidant, who relied on your emotional presence without ever admitting it, suddenly feels unanchored. They begin to sense that the connection they took for granted is slipping away, not because of conflict, but because of growth. And nothing terrifies an avoidant more than someone growing beyond them. The fear becomes stronger when they start reflecting on their behavior. The moments they shut down, the conversations they avoided, the affection they deflected, the opportunities to connect that they ignored. This reflection isn't voluntary, it's triggered by the silence. Because when you stop talking, their mind starts talking for you. It begins reminding them of every moment they failed to show up. Every moment they made you feel unseen. Every moment you reached out while they gave you nothing. This is when worry begins. What if they finally see their worth? What if they move on? What if someone new enters their life? What if I pushed them too far? What if my silence became the reason they stopped caring? Avoidants pretend they don't care. They pretend they're numb. But they feel fear deeply. They just mask it behind logic and distraction. Yet nothing can distract them from the possibility that they may have lost you emotionally. That's when the fear overtakes their avoidance. They begin checking their phone more often. They start monitoring your presence online. They look for signs that you still care, still think of them, still miss them. But when they don't find those signs, fear becomes certainty. This is the beginning of their emotional unraveling, the moment they realize your silence isn't about them anymore. It's about you finding yourself again. It's about you rediscovering your worth. It's about you choosing peace over pain. And that realization shakes them to their core. Because for the first time, your silence speaks louder than anything you ever said. As the fear begins tightening around them, something even more intense unfolds inside the avoidant, the emotional replay they can't escape. This is the stage they never talk about, the stage they don't show anyone, the stage that happens entirely in their mind when the world is quiet and distraction stops working. It happens late at night, in the early morning, in the moments between tasks, in the spaces where their brain suddenly has room to breathe. It is in these hidden spaces that the avoidant begins to replay everything they once dismissed, everything they once ignored, everything they once minimized. And this replay is brutal, because now they're not seeing the connection through the lens of fear. They're seeing it through the lens of loss. They start remembering the things you said, the softness in your words, the effort you put into understanding them, the patience you showed every time they shut down. They remember moments where you were emotionally present in ways no one ever was. They remember how you tried even when you were hurting. They remember how you reached for them, even when they gave you nothing in return. In these replays, your face looks different to them now, not like someone who wanted too much, but like someone who wanted them in the purest way possible. They see your eyes again, not in the moments where you were frustrated, but in the moments where you were trying to connect with them, trying to help them feel safe, trying to understand their heart when they couldn't even understand their own. They replay conversations where you opened up emotionally, and they realize they didn't meet you halfway, not because they didn't care, but because they were terrified. But now there's no noise between those memories, no excuses, no distractions. The truth shows up naked, and it lands hard. They remember the way you used to message them with warmth, the way you checked on them on days when no one else did, the way you made them feel seen in their quietest, darkest moments, the way you cared about their feelings even when they couldn't express them. And suddenly, instead of feeling pressured, they feel something very different: guilt, quiet guilt, heavy guilt. The guilt of someone who realizes you were not asking for too much, you were giving too much. This emotional replay becomes relentless. They remember your tone, your laugh, your patience, even your silence in moments when you held back tears because you didn't want to overwhelm them. They remember the vulnerability you showed when you trusted them with your feelings. And now, instead of brushing those moments aside, They feel the weight of what they didn't give back. They can't escape the truth anymore. You were trying to create a connection while they were trying to avoid one. They replay their own behavior too. The times they shut down, the times they didn't respond, the times they stayed distant, the times they chose fear over closeness. They see themselves through your eyes for the first time, and the realization hits like a punch. Why did I do that? Why didn't I show up? Why didn't I try? These questions haunt them, but the answers don't comfort them, they hurt them. Because now they can see clearly what their avoidance cost them. They replay the last moments before the silence, your energy, your tone, the subtle changes you made, the heaviness in your heart that they ignored. And now those final moments feel different. They feel like a warning they didn't hear. They feel like a goodbye they didn't recognize. They feel like a chance they wasted. And the more they replay these moments, the more they feel the regret settling into their chest. This replay is not gentle. It's not nostalgic. It's not kind. It's punishing. It forces them to face themselves. It forces them to confront the truth that it wasn't you who failed. It was them. It forces them to acknowledge that you loved them in a way they didn't know how to receive. And now that love is something they only have access to in memory. Every memory makes the silence louder. Every replay makes the loss feel more real. Every emotional flashback becomes another piece of evidence that they pushed away someone who cared. And once this replay starts, they cannot control it. They cannot escape it. They cannot silence it. This is the stage where regret is born, where longing awakens, where avoidance begins to crack. This emotional replay is the bridge between fear and realization, and it is the very thing that pulls them closer to the moment they will reach for you again. There is always a moment, unexpected, sudden, and emotionally explosive, when something small breaks through the avoidance defenses and shakes them in a way nothing else ever has. It's never a dramatic event. It's not a long message you send, not a confrontation, not a confession, not a plea. It's something subtle, something ordinary, something so small that other people would overlook it completely. But for the avoidant, this tiny moment becomes the emotional earthquake that cracks the foundation of their avoidance. This is the trigger that breaks their psychological wall. This is the shift that makes their chest tighten, their heart sink, their mind panic, because for the first time, they feel the true weight of potentially losing you. It usually happens when they least expect it. They may be scrolling casually, trying to distract themselves, when they see something that doesn't match the version of you they kept in their mind. Maybe you look happier. Maybe you're glowing in a way that doesn't include them. Maybe your eyes look lighter, as if a burden lifted the moment they disappeared. Maybe you're surrounded by people who value you. Maybe you're doing things you once begged them to do with you. Or maybe you're quiet, not in a wounded way, but in a peaceful, grounded way that signals emotional detachment instead of longing. It could be as simple as you updating a picture, or not posting at all, or sharing something that reflects healing, or being active without reaching out, or responding to others but not to them, or showing a kind of confidence they never saw when you were emotionally invested in them. And that's when something inside them snaps. Because avoidants build their emotional world around assumptions. Assumptions that you'll always be there, that you'll always try, that you'll always wait, that your heart will always bend for theirs. But when they see evidence that your world is moving without them, that's the moment their fear turns into panic. This is the trigger that makes their stomach drop. The trigger that makes their mind question everything. The trigger that makes them understand that silence wasn't temporary, it was transformation. They start asking themselves questions they don't want to answer. Have they moved on? Have they lost feelings? Are they happier without me? Did I push them too far? Am I too late? These questions hit harder than any fight, harder than any breakup, harder than any emotional conversation you ever had. Because these questions force them to confront a truth they never emotionally prepared for, the possibility that they lost you. They begin analyzing every small detail, every change. They notice the confidence in your posture, the strength in your tone, the shift in your energy. They notice you're no longer emotionally orbiting them. You're not reaching out. You're not waiting. You're not collapsing into the same patterns. Your silence doesn't feel like longing anymore. It feels like liberation. And that shakes them deeply, because they suddenly recognize the truth. You're slipping out of their emotional world, and they can't stop it. This tiny moment becomes a psychological punch, because it exposes something the avoidant has been trying to avoid their entire life: loss. Not just loss of a person, but loss of emotional safety, loss of familiarity, loss of the version of themselves they could only access through you. It forces them to see the impact of their distance. It reveals the emptiness behind their avoidance. It proves that time is not always on their side, that running doesn't prevent endings, that silence can be final, that pulling back doesn't guarantee someone will remain in place. This one small trigger unravels their entire emotional defense system layer by layer. Suddenly, they feel urgency, they feel longing, they feel regret, they feel fear, they feel the emotional consequences of their choices hitting them all at once. The very feelings they've spent their whole life avoiding become impossible to outrun. That one external trigger, tiny to everyone else, becomes the moment their internal world shifts from "I'm safe" to "I'm losing them." And once this emotional reality settles in, they can't go back to the psychological numbness they were hiding behind. This trigger becomes the spark that intensifies their emotional replay, accelerates their regret, heightens their awareness of your worth, and pushes them closer to taking action. It's the moment the avoidant finally feels what they never thought they would: the fear of losing someone irreplaceable. This small, unexpected moment is what breaks their emotional silence more than anything else, because it reminds them that silence is not control, it's a risk. And now, for the first time, they see that the biggest risk of all is losing you forever. The exact moment an avoidant decides to reach out after no contact is not logical, not strategic, not planned. It is emotional. It is the moment when the weight of missing you becomes heavier than the fear of intimacy, the fear of vulnerability, the fear of being seen. Avoidants live their entire lives running from emotional intensity, believing that distance protects them, believing that silence keeps them safe. But there always comes a moment, a breaking point, where the emotional cost of losing you becomes too much for their nervous system to ignore. And when that moment arrives, their fear of closeness collapses under the bigger fear they can no longer outrun: the fear of life without you. This moment begins quietly. They might wake up one morning, open their phone, and instinctively expect a message from you. And when they don't see one, something inside them drops. It's not panic yet, not desperation, but a realization that the connection feels distant in a way it never did before. They may try to distract themselves, dive into work, keep themselves busy, but everything feels slightly off. Something is missing, not just your presence, but the emotional stability and warmth they silently relied on. They don't want to admit it, but their mind keeps reaching for you in the background of their thoughts, like muscle memory they can't control. Then the silence starts to feel heavier. Days pass, maybe weeks. And every day without you becomes another reminder that they don't have emotional access to you anymore. They begin to feel the slow ache of missing you. Not the kind that comes from loneliness, but the kind that comes from losing someone who made them feel calmer, safer, more grounded. This longing grows in silence because avoidants need time for feelings to rise. They don't process emotion instantly. They feel things late, delayed, slowly, but once it arrives, it hits them deeply. They start noticing small things. They realize they missed the way you talked to them, the way you understood them without needing explanations, the way you gave emotional safety they didn't even know they craved. They realize they miss your presence, not because it filled their world with intensity, but because it made their world feel less empty. And this longing creates a discomfort inside them they can't soothe through distraction anymore. Then comes the emotional tipping point, the moment they genuinely feel you slipping away. Maybe it's a change in your energy. Maybe you're happier. Maybe you're lighter. Maybe your silence feels stronger. Maybe they sense that you've accepted the distance instead of fighting against it. Maybe they feel, for the first time, that you're not waiting for them. This realization is what flips the emotional switch inside them. Missing you becomes heavier than the fear of reaching out. Avoidants spend their lives believing they don't need anyone. It's their emotional armor. But when they miss someone in a way that makes them question that belief, the armor breaks. They feel vulnerable, exposed, emotional, all the things they've spent years avoiding. And in that moment, something powerful happens inside them. The longing becomes unbearable. They want to hear your voice. They want to check in. They want to reconnect. They want to know if they still have space in your heart. They want to know if they lost you completely, or if there's still a small chance to come back. This is the exact moment their fear of losing you outweighs their fear of closeness. It doesn't matter how strong their avoidance was. It doesn't matter how long the silence lasted. It doesn't matter how stubborn their pride is. When missing you becomes the louder emotion, everything else inside them collapses. They begin typing messages and deleting them. They check your profile obsessively. They imagine what you'd say if they reached out. They rehearse conversations in their mind. And they feel a growing urgency, an emotional pressure telling them, if I don't reach out now, it might really be over. This emotional urgency breaks the psychological barrier they built around themselves. Suddenly, vulnerability feels like less of a threat than losing the connection forever. Suddenly, reaching out feels like the only way to stop the quiet ache growing inside them. Suddenly, the silence doesn't feel like safety. It feels like punishment. It feels like regret. It feels like losing something irreplaceable. And so, in a moment where longing becomes stronger than fear, they finally reach out. They don't reach out because they've healed. They don't reach out because they suddenly understand everything. They reach out because their heart finally becomes louder than their avoidance. Because the pain of losing you becomes greater than the fear of needing you. Because they realize you mattered, and they didn't realize how much until the silence made it impossible to ignore. This is the exact moment everything changes. The moment the avoidant stops running, not because they no longer fear closeness, but because losing you has become the greater fear.